Thanks for your company. Now our political discussion with a regular political panel. Ben Oquist, Executive Director at the Australia Institute, is with me. Joining us shortly as well as Nick Cater, Executive Director of the Menzies Research Centre. Ben, first to you. Great to see some progress, isn't it, on the borders front, with Anastasia Palaszczuk to confirm the reopening yesterday to New South Wales, today Victoria, both of them to have their borders reopened as of next week.
With the borders open by Christmas, is going to make everybody happy. The premiers have come out looking good out of this. I mean, they have copped a lot of flack from the federal government at times and others for keeping the borders closed too long, but and lockdowns too tight. Essentially, the accusation being that they put health before the economy. But I think come the end of the year, they're looking pretty good. One of the things that we've been doing at the Australia Institute is tracking a question since August. Which level of government do you think is doing a better job at handling and responding to the COVID crisis? And at times they've been neck and neck, but our latest results show the states shooting out in front. And I think despite the criticism for the closed border policy, and there has been hardships and there has been places where it could have been done better, overall, the people are rewarding their state premiers for keeping them safe. And that in the end, it's been the effective economic response too, as the economy is more likely to bounce back when the virus is so under control. So the health response has made for a better economic response in the end.
Nick Cater, Ben makes the argument that some of the premiers are looking good. The nation's looking good, isn't it, really, when you look at the number of COVID cases compared to the rest of the world?
You'd rather be here than just about anywhere else in the world, wouldn't you? But yeah, I mean, that's right. We've done very well. But let's not underestimate the cost. I mean, at one stage, the border closures were estimated to cost us at least $2 billion a week in lost business. And that's vital. And that's going to make it harder to come out of this recession. I think what really frustrated a lot of us was the sort of arbitrary and irrational and unscientifically based nature of some of those decisions. I mean, why, for instance, was Sydney people prevented from going from Queensland for so long and so forth, and the uncertainty of it. You know, businesses make plans. Qantas makes plans. It's got a scheduled tin to go in the air. And that's very expensive to have to keep chopping and changing this. It's been a very expensive exercise. I hope we never see it again. And I hope next time this is either better coordinated or better still, that states really get a grip of the track and tracing so that we can actually handle free movement between states.
Yeah, like New South Wales has done. New South Wales has done that. I mean, it's been a bizarre year when you think about the best premier in terms of managing all the free movement and economy and so on and still keeping a lid on it, has been copping it for a whole range of different reasons. But, just in terms of your survey, Ben Oquist, with the Australia Institute, I'm interested in this because, the federal government's economic support via JobKeeper and so on has actually enabled the states to put in the tough measures. Without that, they would have been completely demolished. Well, so they've benefited from the federal government's economic, ballast.
True. Chicken and egg, though, isn't it? Like, I mean, Nick's pointing out that the borders cost the economy in some... the border closures cost the economy in some situations, but you've got to compare it to the counterfactual. What if the virus had got out of control in more places? Or what if the virus wasn't brought back under control in Victoria? You're right, you needed the combination of good economic response. I don't think the government's done enough in the long term on the economy, and I think they could have done some smarter things that would have had better longer term benefits. But they did in the end put in JobKeeper, and they did put in JobSeeker. I think all sorts of people have been left out. The arts in particular has been smashed, and the government really could have done more. But without the states getting the health crisis under control, you're just not going to allow the economy to boom in the long term, because if you'd let the virus rip more and had the borders open, that wouldn't have caused the public to get out there and spend. They still would have been frightened by the virus. And as Nick said, you wouldn't rather be any other place in the world but because of Australia, and that's because the states took strong health action first.
Yeah, well, indeed, and as you say, it's the chicken and the egg. But it's there are also, I think, arguments, Nick Cater, to the degree to which some of the states have acted and held lockdowns for, the severity and so on. Obviously, there are there are arguments on both sides of that. But one thing we all agree on, and that is the vaccine or the vaccines, a number of candidates looking promising, which the market is absolutely flying right now in terms of the optimism around that, Nick.
Yeah, and let's not forget how marvellous and quickly this has been developed by a number of companies, and this is terrific. But look, I mean, nobody was ever talking about letting the virus rip. All we were talking about was states doing things efficiently and effectively so that they could actually handle a degree of the virus circulating in the community, that it wouldn't be a problem, for instance, if somebody arrived from Victoria with the virus, because they'd be on top of it in no time at all. And I think it's the abject failure of state governments, apart from the exceptional example of New South Wales, to get on top of that very basic skill, which has meant we've had to suffer this pain. I mean, let's face it, the border lockdowns were a mission of defeat. It should never happen in a country like Australia if we were doing things, say, as well as they were doing them in Taiwan in terms of track and trace. That's what we should be aspiring to. So let's not get complacent about the way we've done things here.
Yeah, and complacent about the cause of the lockdown in Victoria in the first place, which was a massive stuff-up. I know that it's sacrilege to say it in parts of social media to remind people of that. That's what happened, but that is what happened. Let's finish now, if we can, on Matthias Cormann. He's in Lisbon as we speak, running for the OECD. Is that fair enough expenditure of public funds? And it's certainly Labor backing it. Penny Wong has reiterated her support for Matthias Cormann in that venture.
Well, I'm loath to criticise money being spent on politicians doing their jobs. It's kind of, it's easy. The public doesn't like it. The public doesn't like politicians being paid at all, let alone being paid to travel business class and flying around the world. The public hates it. But, you know, governments have to do their jobs. I think the real problem, though, is not Cormann spending the money. The real problem is Cormann's track record on climate policy. That's what's going to get him in trouble in bidding for this OECD seat. My money's on the Swedish candidate, Cecilia Malmström, former EU Trade Commissioner. And I know people say, look, we've got to back Cormann because it's a Team Australia moment. But I'm on Team Planet. The planet needs somebody who's going to stand up for action on climate change. And I'm reminded of this when reading Marion Wilkinson's book, The Carbon Club, and she reports on Cormann's devastating role with Cory Bernardi in the monkey pod room, running the climate skeptic arguments against their own leader at the time, Malcolm Turnbull, who was trying to put in a climate change policy. He was at the far right end of climate policy in a right-wing coalition government that was anti-action on climate change, and I think that's going to do his candidacy a problem. But if he won, it would be terrible for climate policy around the globe. Whether
you agree with Matthias Cormann or not on that particular issue, Nick Cater, given OECD and it has many European members, that's one thing that's working against him, I guess, is that particular policy issue, is it not?
I don't think so. I think that he, like the rest of the government, have taken a rational response to this. And it's not, climate change is not the issue here, Ben. It's the economics of how you handle and respond to climate change that is the real challenge. And his record on economics is second to none. He has been an exceptional finance minister, dare I say, you know, the most successful finance minister in recent times. He speaks several European languages. He is well acquainted with people in Europe. He would be a marvellous person to have in that job, and from Australia's point of view, to have somebody of that calibre who loves Australia and still calls Australia home in that role, that'd be magnificent. And I think even Ben would have to agree with that, albeit his reservations on the climate change issue.
And Nick Cater, I appreciate it. Great to see you from the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Cater, and also Ben Oquist from the Australia Institute. Thank you, gentlemen.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
Wages are growing at their slower, sustained pace.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.